All right, Miles, we have got to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. And look, Raider Nation, we hear from you guys all the time. It's been kind of a rough past 365 days, to be blunt about it. We've got obviously new news out of Las Vegas involving running back Josh Jacobs. The Raiders decided not to lock him into a long-term deal. He is now slated to be a franchise tag player. Will he report to camp? Will he not report to camp? We've got some news to surround all that. But Miles, I'll tell you what, this has certainly been a very interesting development. But I think this is actually a good sign for the Raiders, believe it or not.
Yeah, Nick, I think if the Raider fans will hold on for a second, whatever way they want to think on this argument and listen to what we have to say, I think there's a lot of positives here, a lot of intelligence coming out of the Raiders organization, whether you'd like to believe that or not. But before we get into what we think about it, let's ask the Raiders fans in the comment section below today. We're curious, what do you think the Raiders should have done with Josh Jacobs? Do you want a long-term extension? If we got to be honest with ourselves, it was never going to be cheap. They were reportedly very far apart. Or did you want the franchise tag on him? Do you think they dealt with this correctly? Let us know in the comment section below what you wanted the Raiders to do with Josh Jacobs. But nonetheless, Nick, let's get on into it. What's going on? What do you think about Josh Jacobs and the Raiders?
Yeah, Miles, first, let's get into the primary source of this issue. Let's pull up the article, get all the details and specifics, and we'll give our opinions on it. If you want to go ahead and throw up the report from ESPN. All right, here we go. Monday's deadline for franchise players to agree to long-term contracts passed without deals for the New York Giants, Saquon Barkley, and the Las Vegas Raiders is Josh Jacobs and the Dallas Cowboys, Tony Pollard. The three running backs were the only players who received the franchise tag not to have reached a long-term contract, and they had until 4 p.m. Eastern time Monday to get one. They will now have to play the 2023 season on their franchise tenders worth $10.091 million for running backs. Pollard has already signed his tender. Barkley and Jacobs, however, remain unsigned and stayed away from their teams' offseason programs. Because they are unsigned, Barkley and Jacobs cannot be fined for not attending training camp, which begins for veterans on both the Giants and Raiders on July 25th. It's about 8 days away, about a week away now. Barkley and Jacobs are not expected to report to training camp the rest of their teams. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported Monday. The two unsigned stars will lose money only if they miss regular season games and forfeit game checks. All right, Miles, look, we talk about it all the time. The absolute worst thing you can do, the dumbest thing you can possibly do from a roster construction perspective is overpay for a veteran running back, sign him into a long-term deal. All the dumb teams do it. If you don't believe me, look at what the Dallas Cowboys, I'm a Cowboys fan, I love the Cowboys. What they did with Ezekiel Elliott really hurt their team. With the Los Angeles Rams, they did with Todd Gurley, it really narrowed their championship window. And you look at the list of the highest paid running backs right now, look at some of these guys at the top of the list. Alvin Kamara with the Saints. The Saints have not been one of the better run franchises in terms of roster management over the past half decade. You see Nick Chubb for the Browns, not far from the top of the list. Do you really want to be on a list with the Cleveland Browns in terms of roster management? And look, Raider Nation, Josh Jacobs is a great player. I know it's more drama. You're tired of all the drama. But I tell you what, this is actually a good move by Las Vegas to stick to their guns, not give in, and not overpay for Jacobs and not lock him into a long-term deal. I think it's actually a really smart move by Las Vegas, Miles. But all right, I'll throw it over to you now. What do you got about it, and what are your thoughts on this deal or not deal, I should say?
Yeah, Nick, I think this saying goes something around, if you don't pay attention to history, it's doomed to repeat itself. So if we go back to 2014, well, let's look at some of the rushing leaders, NFL rushing leaders. That's quite frankly what Josh Jacobs was. He was the best running back in the NFL last year. DeMarco Murray in 2014, he, with Dallas, went over to Philadelphia, fell off a cliff. We never really heard from him again. We go 2015, Adrian Peterson, probably the last year that he was in the league. He bounced around a little bit after that, but fell off a cliff after he was the 2015 rushing leader. 2016, Ezekiel Elliott falls off a cliff the next year, is again the rushing leader after that. But then since then, we know what the story has been. 2017, Kareem Hunt, same story. 2018, Zeke. 2019, 2020, Derrick Henry, kind of a unicorn there, back-to-back rushing leaders. Next year, gets hurt, falls off a cliff, 900 yards, hasn't been quite as good. We know what happened with Jonathan Taylor this past year. There's really not a great precedent on signing a running back, especially one, because if you know what that means when you're the NFL rushing leader, is you've gotten a ton of touches. There is a lot of mileage on that body. And as we say, whether you like to hear it or not, running backs die young in the NFL. Not die, but their careers die young because they get used up. There's only so much tread on that tire. And being the rushing leader, you use a lot of tread that season. So there's a pretty good chance he's going to have a bad year the next year. So I think this was a really smart move, historically speaking, for the Raiders to not go ahead and lock this guy up to a huge long-term deal, because I think Everyone knows by now, running back by committee is taking the NFL by storm, and not paying running backs, getting new guys throughout the draft on cheap deals has really become a thing of the future. I'm not a fan. I think running backs need to do something about the market because they need to get paid what they're owed, but that's not how it's going right now, Nick.
Yeah, and one of the things I talked about what dumb teams are doing, Miles, if you look at what the smarter teams in football are doing, and three teams really jump out at me. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously division rival for the Raiders, the Philadelphia Eagles, and of course the New England Patriots going back the past decade. None of those three teams ever spent a lot of money at the running back position. The Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles still don't. You never want to do what dumb teams do. You never want to do what the Cleveland Browns do in this situation. And you want to kind of follow what the Kansas City Chiefs, what the Eagles, and what the Patriots have done. That's the recipe for success. That's frankly why they brought in Ziegler to be the GM. And I think the fact that they stuck to their guns and didn't pay and overpay for Josh Jacobs on a long-term deal is a really smart move by this front office. Look, it's going to hurt. It's going to sting. Well, we don't know what's going to happen with Jacobs. I honestly think he'll end up reporting before the regular season starts. And so you'll have him for the regular season. He may take a game or two to get up to full speed, but I still think he'll be an impact player. But you didn't risk your future by signing him to a long-term deal just to make him happy. Brutal situation for running backs, Mize. I agree, but this is a great business decision by the Raiders front office.